p.m. on Monday, June 7th, and that will also be a remote meeting. First up, we have the consent agenda. I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Was that Jess?
June.
Yes.
All right. So consent agenda. Jess, yes. June?
Yes.
Yes.
Lisa? Mike?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that is unanimous. Thank you. Public communications, Superintendent Morgan, do we have any public communications this evening?
We do not.
All right. Thank you.
Craig, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Craig. Who moved that motion?
I believe it was Lisa in June, unless I got that wrong for a third time.
Okay. I just want to make sure I had it right. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, under reports and information, I do not have a chairperson report this evening, so we'll move on to the student representatives reports. I believe I saw Olivia somewhere.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello.
Hi. Let me share my screen.
Perfect.
I see Catherine also. I'm not sure if anyone else is here.
Yeah, me and Katie are going to split it.
Excellent. Okay.
All right. So recent and current events. On May 1st, we had the Renaissance Music and Art Festival, which is the first outdoor music performance from the choir that we've had this year. AP exams just finished today. On the 19th, there's going to be a band concert. Senior prom is the 22nd, and it's at NM. And then the 25th is another outdoor choir concert.
The Senior Athletic Awards are going to be on May 29th. Senior Finals will take place next week, the 24th to the 28th. And then Senior Awards Night is going to be June 1st, and the Top 25 and Academic Award Night for seniors. And then the Senior Parade will be on June 2nd. And it's going to be from the Nissitissit Middle School to the high school at 4 p.m. Project graduation is that same day from 5 to 9 at the high school. And then graduation for the seniors is on June 4th.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's very good to see concerts and events and all that on the schedule again. So thank you both and the whole student body for hanging in there and getting to this point. But it's really good to see a full list of activities again. All right. Next up, Superintendent's report, Mr. Morgan.
So I do have some important changes that were announced today, and I am going to read it just so that it's in the record and that anyone that's listening in can hear what happened. And I do just want to make it very clear that superintendents were not given any advance notice of this, and all of these changes are going into place tomorrow. So just to make you aware, and this is coming off of both the governor's announcement today, but also it's coming from DESE through their work with the Massachusetts COVID Command Center Medical Advisory. So effective tomorrow, May 18th, students will no longer have to wear masks when outdoors, even if distance cannot be maintained. The guidance applies to recess, physical education, youth sports, and outdoor learning environments. Adults must continue to wear masks outdoors if 6 feet of physical distancing cannot be maintained. At this time, all students and adults must continue to wear masks indoors. Second big change is that schools will no longer have to avoid sharing objects. This includes classroom materials, items for physical education, or art supplies. Shared objects no longer have to be cleaned or disinfected between use and should follow the updated cleaning guidance that the state has released. Third change is schools will now only have to clean high-touch surfaces, door handles, bus seats, drinking fountains, and shared objects within the school on school transport vehicles once a day. If schools are located in an area of high transmission, they may consider cleaning more frequently. Similarly, for areas where masks are not worn, such as lunch, schools may consider cleaning those surfaces between use. If a surface is If a surface or object is visibly soiled, it should be immediately cleaned. And if someone in the school in the past 24 hours confirmed to have COVID-19 in any of those spaces, they should be cleaned or disinfected. And finally, gathering limits for school events with outside participants will be lifted beginning May 29th. I do want to point out, though, that the state is still maintaining that although mask wearing is not required for students outdoors, again, for physical education or athletics or outdoor classrooms, they are still maintaining that that masks must be worn and the guidelines must be followed that were released by the state for end of the year activities such as prom and graduation. So that's all I have for comments at this time. This does go into effect tomorrow. It is guidance. I will say that the end of the year activities, though, that they're talking about is they're not phrasing that as guidance. They are saying that those rules must be followed. So at this point in time, again, this is all guidance with the exception of the end of the year activities. Questions on that from the committee?
Brad, what did you say about prom and graduation?
So all of the guidelines that were put into place about a month or so ago are still on the table. They must be followed. So it's guidance, but it's actually a mandate that must be followed. They use the word must throughout the document. So again, even though you can have, potentially, take lacrosse as an example, a lacrosse game with, 40 kids on a field, people in the stands, and things of that nature. They do view the prom is something that's very different. They're saying because of singing and dancing that's taking place. So they're still following those guidelines for all end of the year activities.
All right, any other questions for the superintendent?
And that is all I have for now. There's other items I have to speak to in the agenda, but I'll hold off until we get there.
All right.
Footloose.
What was that? I don't know what that was. All right, moving on. New business. We have borrowing in anticipation of revenue. Who, Nancy, going to speak to this or?
Yes.
So this is a customary article that we vote each year to authorize the district to borrow money in the case that we might need to because of, in the past, we used to borrow because we were paid our Chapter 70 money quarterly, and sometimes the cash flow was an issue and we would request to borrow temporarily until the funding would come in. In this case, in many years, we haven't had to do this since they switched to a monthly distribution for the Chapter 70 payments. So it's allows us the option of borrowing, but doesn't require it. And again, it's just typically used for short-term borrowing, less than a year, if there was a cash flow issue or Chapter 70 didn't come in as expected.
All right, I will, if there are no questions or comments, then I will take a motion that the school committee authorize the district treasurer under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 16G, as amended by Chapter 143 of the Acts of 1972, and with the approval of the chairperson of the school committee to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of revenue for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021, and to issue a note or notes, therefore payable within 1 year, and to renew any note or notes as may be given for a period of less than 1 year in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 17. Such action is to be confirmed and recorded immediately by the school committee and so included in the committee minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Tom and Lisa, any questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Next up, we have school zone crosswalks.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. It's something that has come up really since I arrived in the district over the past 3 years. Are concerns around the safe ability for our students to cross, primarily at 3 locations: at the Nissitissit, at the Varnum Brook, and at the Hawthorne Brook. Even though there are crosswalks in place, they are on busy roads. You have Nissitissit and Varnum that are on Hollis, and then you have Hawthorne Brook that is on Route 13. And both of those are town-controlled roads, so it's not something where special permitting needs to be done through the Mass Department of Transportation, and that has been through conversations I have had with them. That said, I've spoken with both town managers in Pepperell and Townsend, as well as the police chiefs, and something we would like to put in place are the rectangular rapid flashing beacons and crosswalks at the Nissitissit, Varnum, and Hawthorne Brook. They're something that you can see. They're pretty similar to what is in place in downtown Groton. I think there are 5 of them on that strip of Main Street. It basically allows students to cross, and the signs basically light up and let the traffic know, the oncoming traffic know, that there are people in the crosswalk. There are crossing guards at those locations, but again, where all 3 of those locations have kids going after school, on the weekends, things of that nature, when there is no crossing guard there, it would definitely add to the safety, and then it would obviously double the safety with the crossing guards there. But it is something I've heard from several community members expressing concerns around the lack of an ability for a student to pass when there isn't a crossing guard there in order to do so safely. Right now, the high school does have something very similar to those. They do have signs that light up. They do have very clear crosswalks. I know that the Spalding has received a grant to have one of these put in. But basically at this point in time, in order to have them put in at the Nissitissit, Varnum, and Hawthorne Brook, we would have to wait another 18 months to potentially apply for a grant when the school district currently has the funds to do that now. So the finance committee did recommend, and I know Susan's on the call, to bring this to the committee so that we can bypass the grant process and basically begin this now. It is somewhat costly. I do not have a final cost, but it does involve an engineer coming into each of the 3 locations. So engineering it out, speccing it out, making sure that the sidewalks are handicap accessible, and then the purchasing and installation of the rectangular rapid response beacons.
It's pretty well outside.
Brad, this is Susan.
Hey, Susan.
Is there any way as part of this we could retrofit the ones at the high school? Because that whole strip is when it's school time, a pile of circle yellow flashing lights. It's not easy to differentiate what's flashing at you, why. It would be nice if those crosswalks had those strobing rectangular.
Sure. So I did speak to Lori Shattuck at
perhaps retrofit those.
Okay, so I did speak to Lori Shattuck at DOT about that. That can be done, and it is a relatively easy process. It would not have to be engineered or anything like that, but there would have to be a sign swap out. But that would have to go through the state because 119 is a state-owned and maintained road. So it's just it's a different procedure. It's not definitely going to be approved because it has to go through the state. And those of you that were involved with the building project know that that was no easy task, even having those crosswalks put in. But it is something. I did ask that question, if we could swap out the current signs that are there for the rectangular rapid response beacons. And they said we could, but there's paperwork involved, which again, I'm happy to take the lead on and do it. But it's not a guarantee because it is a state-owned road. But Lori Shattuck did not believe it would present an issue.
Couldn't most of that sign remain and just the light part of it be swapped out to maybe be a little more cost effective?
So you have to buy the entire set, minus the concrete, which basically holds it in place. So it's not something that would be super expensive. And again, DOT is looking at it as a sign swap out, but it would have to again go through the permitting process. So we can certainly add the high school to it. I wasn't sure what people's thoughts were on that, where there are similar signs. They're not exactly the same. They are somewhat similar. They do light up, but it's not, I don't think they're as eye-catching as the rapid response flashing beacons.
I would be interested in knowing the cost, and perhaps the towns, one of the towns, we have 2 sets out there, I believe, could make use of that in another spot that doesn't have so many flashing yellow lights, you know, the ones that are there currently.
Yes, I believe the actual signs are about 20 to 30,000 each. That includes install. But again, it may be different at the high school because they may be able to use the concrete that's already there. The way that these are put in, they're basically poured, they're solar powered, which makes them very expensive because there's no electricity involved. But there is basically a form that is used. I don't know if it's the same form that was used for the signs that are currently at the high school, and it may be as simple as a simple sign swap out, so you don't have to worry about the install in the concrete work. So you could be looking at a substantially cheaper price. But it looks like for each crosswalk and each sign, you know, if we were going to take Nissitissit, for example, I have been given an estimate of somewhere between, I think it was $50,000 to $60,000 for Nissitissit to be done. That includes the engineer, that includes the work that the town has to do, that includes the signs, and it includes the form work for the for the signs themselves. But everything has to be ADA compliant. So it's not 50 or 60,000 for a sign, it's for the whole process. So we would be looking at, for the 3 schools, probably over $250,000 for 3 crosswalks to be put in. And then I don't know what the actual cost would be to have signs swapped out at the high school. But again, it doesn't appear to be a problem. It looks like it can be done, but there's a process that we have to follow for the high school, which is very different from, you know, just working with the towns and the police for the other 3.
Superintendent, where, I guess 2 questions. One, I'm curious if we should have a not to exceed amount as part of this, and 2, where would this money be coming from?
Money would be coming from leftover funds from the FY21 budget. You know, as we've mentioned before, we have been able to use COVID money for other things, so it did free up some money. And it has been something that has been talked about previously at some of our admin meetings, just with regard to safety being a concern. And, you know, certainly Hollis Street and Route 13 are extremely busy. And we do have a large number of students that walk to all 3 of those schools, with homes on basically both sides.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to agree with Susan too on the high school ones that, I mean, let alone the existing yellow traffic control lights that are there. Just the way that those lights are configured with the big shroud around them. If you're actually too close to them, it's hard to even see that the light's flashing. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I agree. If there's opportunity to retrofit those from a safety perspective, I think that'll go a long way.
I would recommend that we at least start as a starting point, use 300 as a not to exceed 300,000, and then I can again bring it back to the committee if something happens. But I know that Pepperell and Townsend already have done some work with engineers, so they think it could be a relatively quick job for the engineers to come in and look at the 3 schools. And then again, the process at the high school is a little different because it does involve a sign swap out.
And just for clarity, so is it the existing crosswalk in front of Varnum Brook that would service Nissitissit and Varnum? That's considered one crossing? Is that what we're looking at, or would there be one additional there?
There would be an additional crossing up at Nissitissit.
Okay. And then Hawthorne would be the other one, and then the high school, or? So
Hawthorne, so it would be Varnum, Nissitissit, and Hawthorne. Those would be the 3 that would be done, because Spalding is being done through a grant that Emmy Hoff secured through the rec department.
Okay.
So that's been done already. I'm not sure on the date on that, but it has been approved and it's in process. And then the high school would be somewhat separate. It would be a sign swap out. So it would be 3 full crosswalks with the rectangular rapid response flashing beacons, and then the high school sign swap out.
And then just so our friends in Ashby don't feel left out, there is no crosswalk in front of Ashby Elementary. Is that true?
So
is that not needed?
I'm not sure, but again, I'm basing it off of emails that I have received from people based on the number of walkers. I have not received anything from Ashby. I don't believe, I do not believe walking is a significant issue there. Again, just based on conversations we've had with the administrative team. But the number of walkers, again, I'm basing this off of the complaints that we have received from residents and parents who have their kids walking to school.
All right. Thank you. Susan, I saw your hand first, and then June, we'll go to you.
Yes. I'm a little bit concerned about the expense, knowing the length of our capital needs and the number of things on that list. We have crosswalks in place and crossing guards in place during school hours, which I feel we're responsible for the safety. But after school, if kids are going to the skate parks or the playgrounds, I think it should be something the towns look into funding rather than the schools.
Thank you, Susan. June?
I was just going to comment about Ashby Elementary. Across the street from Ashby Elementary, there's no sidewalk anyhow, and Little House is directly across from the school. So the sidewalk is on the same side of the school, and there's 2 crosswalks just a little further down towards the common. And there's not high traffic on Main Street like the other places, and I think traffic is a bit slower there. I think Ashby will be okay on this one, but thank you for thinking of Ashby, of course. But I think this one we can sit out, and I won't make a fuss about it. So. But when Susan was mentioning costs and stuff, it just jogged a question. How long, what is the expected life of these signs? Like how many years would we get out of it for the cost that we put in?
I don't have the answer to that question. I can find that out.
Thank you, June. Any other questions or comments from folks? Tom?
Yeah, I know a couple of years back, we were talking about, it was one of the regional agreement meetings, the Pepperell town manager mentioned that they were doing some work or looking at some grant work around the sidewalks. I don't know if that's what you were talking about, just tying into, Brad.
Yeah, so basically at this point in time, the town manager in Pepperell is working on that. This would be part of it, but it would essentially expedite it, because at this point in time, where they are in the project and the amount of time it takes once you get the grant, it would be about 18 months of waiting until this actually comes to fruition.
Okay, thanks.
So this would eliminate the great majority of the waiting.
Susan?
I'd recommend the committee vote against this and have this become a town activity, a town expense. So we can, if we have leftover money, we have a lot of things that desperately needs to be done so they don't fall into further disrepair. And I believe we have the safety covered during school hours.
Comments from anybody else before we make a motion or move on? All right, I'm going to make a motion because from a safety perspective, I think this is something that needs to be addressed or at least looked into further. So I don't know if someone else wants to make a motion. And if not, I will go ahead and do it. All right. So I will move that the committee vote to approve obtaining signals and engineering for crosswalks at district schools in an amount not to exceed $300,000 from the FY21 budget.
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Any other questions or comments on this one?
Yes, I was just thinking about the ones in Pepperell because I believe you said there was one crosswalk right now for the two schools. And this would be looking at putting a second one in for the two Pepperell schools, correct? We would be going from 1 to 2. And what is the reasoning behind that? And would we be okay with better signage and better, better setup at just one of them?
So I can certainly respond to that, and I would imagine that most Nissitissit parents would agree. If you're pulling out of Nissitissit, you are, every time you pull out, if you're in a vehicle, you're taking a chance of being hit because you're pulling out of a blind driveway, so to speak. So if you're pulling out on your left-hand side, there's a corner and you can't see around it. So you have to slowly keep edging out until you get out. And by the time you're out, if a car is coming, you're going to get hit. So I do think something, and I've already spoken to the police chief, I think something needs to be done there specifically to get cars, to let people know that are just traveling through town that there's a school there. Because there is no signage at this point in time that actually points that out or makes anyone slow down. If you're coming from Nashua into Pepperell that way.
Okay, thank you. I can think of the area, but I'm not super familiar with it, so that's helpful. Thank you.
There's 3, and Brad, correct me, I don't actually remember if there's a painted crosswalk where the crossing guard sits at the end of, I don't remember if it's Chase or Tucker, whatever the middle street is, but there's a street that's kind of at that blind spot that the superintendent was talking about. Then there's another street, and both of those roads kind of go down to Nissitissit and its parking lot. And then there's a third, which is the driveway to Varnum Brook. Mm-hmm. And that one, I think, does have a painted crosswalk. Is that where the painted one is?
I believe so, yes.
I don't remember. So,
and they have to be redone. I believe that there was one at one point up closer to Nissitissit, but I think I don't think it's visible at this point.
Right. So I think at that first road where that blind curve is, and then what essentially is the third one, which is the entry to Varnum Brook, I think those are the 2 locations. I mean, if it came down to it from a dollar perspective, I mean, I think it's not ideal, but I mean, obviously 1 is better than 0. So,
right.
Susan?
And I understand it's a safety issue, and students, anyone going to basketball courts, going to the skate park, going to the gazebo, going to the playground, all those town facilities, the town should be a part of paying for, or pay for all of it going across the street. I don't believe this should be exclusively or even partially the school's responsibility, just because there happens to be a school on the other side of the street. I believe it should be urgent that the town look into it if the town feels it's an urgent problem.
I think in principle, I somewhat agree with that, but also, I mean, it's taxpayer money at the end of the day. And if there's something that we can do to not only improve the safety of our students, but if it also, by extension, helps the citizens of the town, again, I think I'm supportive of that.
And if we didn't have a huge list of capital projects we definitely need to do, so our infrastructure doesn't continue falling apart, then I wouldn't feel so strongly. I'd say, sure, we could pitch in, but I don't know we're in a position to pitch in.
Any other questions, comments? All right. So the motion is to approve obtaining signals and engineering for crosswalks at district schools in an amount not to exceed $300,000 from this year's budget. All right. So we'll go down the list. Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Susan?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That's 6-1. Thank you. Next up is the 2021-22 school committee meeting schedule, and there should be, of course I closed the window, there should be a document in your packet that has the proposed schedule of meetings. It's something we publish every year, and always make minor adjustments as needed throughout the year as things may come up. Typically we add meetings, not so much get rid of them, but if there's any questions on that, otherwise we'll take a motion to approve that schedule.
Motion to approve the 2021-2022 school committee meeting schedule.
I'll second.
All right, Tom and Lisa, thank you. Any questions? June?
Yes, I was just curious. I know Brad said that we talked about switching date and time, and it wouldn't work out for everyone, so we would keep this on Mondays. But I was just wondering about the time thing. If we did keep it on Mondays, if it was possible to do it earlier. We had talked about a 6 o'clock time. So I didn't know if that was a possibility still, or if it wouldn't end up working out.
I did hear some conflict from some of the committee members that 6 o'clock may not work. I know that from a central office point of view, 6 o'clock certainly would not be an issue, but I think it ended up being too much of an issue for I think a few committee members, to be honest, just with regard to student activities with their own kids, work, and then also being able to get through dinner and all that prior to the meeting, which is certainly understandable.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions on the schedule or concerns? June, is it something where, I mean, is this a workable schedule or?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm fine with 7. I just, I have a new job that I get up earlier, and I'm tired a lot earlier than I used to be now. So I'm just checking, but it's fine. I can keep 7.
And this, I mean, this isn't set in stone. I think as we come out of our abnormal year and a half and start going back to in-person meetings and whatnot, I'm sure people's work schedules and commutes, everything will be different than it had been before. So it's certainly something we can revisit and make sure that it's still a workable solution for everybody. All right, seeing no questions. So this is to approve the schedule. Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So that is unanimous. Thank you. Next up is the 2021-22 subcommittees meeting schedules. I don't know, Robin, was there something in the packet for this schedule, or like it was in the? I didn't see it. I don't know if I'm missing it.
No, but it was on there. I had put it on the draft. I wasn't sure if you all were going to have something to present, but no one told me to take it off, so I left it on.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing.
No, you're not missing anything.
Okay, thank you. So I guess for subcommittees, so we've got finance, negotiation, and policy. And I know Randy's not here to speak to policy, but I know finance has typically been meeting as needed on Wednesday mornings. I don't know, Lisa, if you've got thoughts or if we want to table that and present that back at some point.
We can table it until Wednesday when we have a finance meeting, and we'll talk about it there, and I'll bring it back.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that works for me. Tom, negotiations, I mean, you guys are meeting like twice a day, right? So
something like that. I mean, and it's also an as needed thing too. So, as negotiations are needed, we'll meet.
Excellent. All right. And then for policy, we'll need Randy's input on that. But I think they've been having some regular meetings when they're getting through the policy book now that they're shifting to as needed policies in the regional agreement. I think that will probably change anyway. So we will circle back on that if folks are good. Next up, the Valley Collaborative Board of Directors. Superintendent.
Sure. So I just need the school committee to appoint me to the Valley Collaborative Board of Directors and also the Keystone Collaborative Board of Directors. Should probably do separate motions, separate votes.
Yep. All right. So we'll start with the Valley Collaborative. I will take a motion to have the committee appoint Superintendent Morgan to the Valley Collaborative Board of Directors for the term July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
It's June. Any questions on that? All right. Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. It's unanimous. Congratulations, Superintendent. And then same for the Keystone Educational Collaborative. I'll take a motion to have the committee appoint Superintendent Morgan to the Keystone Educational Collaborative Board of Directors for the term July 1, 2021 through July 30, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I'm doing on that one, sorry. All right, Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the school improvement plans 1-year extension.
Yes, so all of the school improvement plans were set to expire on June 30th of this year. So the 3 elementaries, the 2 middles, and the high school. And after meeting with the administrative team, we would request that we have an additional year in which to work on the goals within those plans. For this year was primarily a year of keeping our heads above water and trying to provide a very different type of education for students. We would appreciate it if the committee would grant us a 1-year extension on those goals. And the same will hold true. Not a tremendous amount of work was done on the district strategic plan either, just because our focus was elsewhere.
And I'll apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head. When were we last updated on progress on those plans?
I don't think we've done an update on the strategic plan since the fall.
Okay.
But it was mentioned at that point in time that a lot of that work was going to have to be delayed. I don't know if it looks like Ms. Milligan would like to speak as well. Generally, the school improvement plans are something that we are updated with and will obviously apprise the committee of what's happening with those as well. But again, this year with the remote learning platform that was in place, the extensive training that had to take place, there was not a tremendous amount of focus put into place. So go ahead, Nancy.
Sure. No, we haven't had an update since last June, and as Superintendent Morgan has said, all the initiatives on the strategic plan had been put on hold this year. So there's no update for this year for the strategic plan in general.
Nancy, do we expect that the plans and the objectives would remain the same with a 1-year extension, or do you anticipate any adjustments needing to be made with that extended term?
So we'll have that as part of our Admin Institute, which happens to be the day after school gets out. So we'll be able to have an update either at our July meeting or our August meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the school improvement plans? All right, I will then take a motion to have the committee approve extending all school improvement plans through June 2022.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Tom, any other questions or comments? All right, Jess,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. So that is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, we have superintendent evaluation. So as existing committee members hopefully remember from last year, this is the time of year when we start the superintendent's evaluation. There are 2 documents in the packet, and thank you, Robin, for putting those in there. One is the DESE guidance, and one is the kind of the evaluation template. I have to go back and check. I believe this is the updated one that we used last year. I don't think there's been significant updates in that, but I haven't validated that. But the process we go by, and Jess, you are, I mean, as a member, more than welcome to provide feedback on what you've seen in your first few weeks. But we also generally will ask the outgoing members. So I'll ask Rob for some feedback as well. And some people will go through and put, well, a lot of comments. Some will put a couple sentences, but what I'll ask, and I'll send something out after this meeting, is that folks fill stuff out. I mean, I think superintendent, in the past, you've offered one-on-one discussions with folks if they had questions. I think we also get a readout at some point on your goals, or get a copy of those just so we can align those up to the rubric. And then have committee members fill out the evaluation, send that to me. I'll consolidate that, and then we would meet in executive session to compile that and go through that, and then come into an open session and actually give the evaluation. So that's kind of the high level process. I know, Susan, you've been through this probably more than anybody. Anything that I missed in that process?
No, I think one important thing to note is if you give any rating except for proficient, you're required to put a comment to explain why it was exemplary or why it needs improvement, or I don't remember what all the scores are. Proficient doesn't require a comment, but it's strongly encouraged. But the other ones besides proficient would require a comment.
Superintendent?
I just wanted to ask when the committee would like me to pass in my self-assessment that you had mentioned previously. I know I did one at the mid-year point, but is there a time that you'd like me to get this out to the committee members?
So we have 2 more meetings before the end of June. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I would, I mean, and I'll leave this open for the committee, but I mean, I think within the next couple weeks, because by our first June meeting, we're going to need to be compiling kind of that first pass of of everybody's feedback and talk about that. And then in our second June meeting, need to present that superintendent to you. I mean, we can always defer to the July meeting. If we don't have to, I'd rather not delay, but if it's better to have you present your self-assessment at our first June meeting, we compile feedback at the second June meeting, and then present the evaluation to you at the first July meeting. I mean, that's an option as well. And I can leave that to whatever folks are more comfortable with.
So I can certainly either present it or just send it to the committee.
Yep.
And then answer questions.
Absolutely.
Really whatever the committee wants.
Yep. Susan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think sending it to us is fine, and but I think presenting it also has the benefit of the community hearing all the accomplishments in the district and what the school's been up to. And I would say the only reason to not give us that feedback in a couple of weeks would be if you think there's going to be significant progress on one of the goals that you wanted to be able to include in that. But I guess you could indicate on there that you expect X, Y, and Z to happen by so-and-so date.
Okay.
But yeah, there is a process of understanding what you've done Because there's just for Jess's benefit, there's plenty of things the superintendent is up to that we're not necessarily aware of the details. So it's good to get regular updates. So we need to absorb the updates, fill out the form, give it to Craig. Craig needs to consolidate all of the information, and then we need to review that in an open meeting. So there are a few steps to go through. I'd say the only reason to delay is if there was some significant activity that we wanted to include in that. But I wouldn't delay by much more than the July meeting at the latest. That's my 2 cents.
Chairman, would it be helpful if I had my self-assessment to you by Friday the 28th? Would that be?
Yes. Yeah, I think that works.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll all be sitting out by the fire on Memorial Day weekend, filling out your evaluations. Yeah, that works. I think that, so we'll do that. I will get folks the template, and I think I usually send out just a quick process overview, but I'll get that out to folks either tonight or tomorrow, so you can start thinking about that. And then I think, Superintendent, I believe your goals are already tied to the specific rubric line items, so that makes it a little easier when we do the assessment to say like, oh, item A, 2, 3, or whatever it is, ties to the specific goal, and that way you know which ones you're evaluating against versus not. All right, any other questions on the evaluation or process? Susan, do you have a, okay, thank you.
Yeah, nope.
All good.
That was a new one. I was going to say that for Jess's benefit, I know that it may have been in the packet. I didn't dig into it in detail to really confirm it, but there's a rubric the state provides, which is very helpful if you haven't been through this before. So you kind of have a sense of what a 1, 2, 3, or 4 is and what's intended for it, instead of just having your own expectations of what it is and assigning a number based on your own expectations. So I found that helpful, along with the roles and responsibilities and all the instructions for filling it out. And even though I've done this lots of times, it's a good reminder for me too. So if you could get that out to the committee, that would be great.
Yep. Yeah, I'll send it like that. It is in the packets. The superintendent evaluation for SC is the document, and down the left side are the different qualities or objectives. So you have like I-C assessment, right, and then you have the columns for what is unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, and exemplary. So Susan, yeah, it's a good narrative to kind of put some context around things. So
there's the rubric, and is there the like 1 or 2 page like instructions that kind of have paragraphs and bulleted points and stuff? Was that there too? I just glanced. I didn't absorb it.
Yeah, there was a page or 2 on the instructions with the matrix, the rubrics for every single assessment, which we don't obviously do every single one.
Right.
I'll need to get the updated template. I don't think that was in the DESE guide. Maybe it was. I didn't scroll through that, but there's the DESE guide when they updated things last August. Those are all in there as well. So it is a governed process, if that's the right word. It's something that DESE has a lot of structure around. So it's intentional, but it's a very structured. One of our core objectives as a school committee is to evaluate the superintendent.
And I highly recommend, once you review the superintendent's feedback, to also then fill out the form as a first pass and then meet with the superintendent, because that's when I tend to find my questions. Isn't when I read his self-evaluation, it's when I'm trying to fill the form out based on what I read. And I think it's good to get that clarified up front, because sometimes you misunderstand and you think less happened than it really did. And I'd hate to have that reflected when a conversation would clear it up and you'd realize a lot did happen.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on. No old business listed, so on to subcommittee reports. Lisa, anything from Accelerator Repair?
Nope, we are good so far.
All right. I don't believe there's an update from the building committee. I think we're just waiting on what hopefully is one of our final meetings to start to close things out. finance, Lisa?
We had a meeting on May 5th. We discussed the crosswalks, which we discussed earlier in this meeting. And we also talked about establishing the stabilization fund, which Brad maybe can give an update to the committee about that, as it was taken to Townsend's town meeting 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago.
Sure. So, and I believe I shared this with all the committee members as well. It's my understanding and also legal counsel's understanding that the vote that was taken at the Townsend town meeting is a vote that actually passed. Initially, it went through, is not passing. And I think it was because there was confusion around what type of stabilization fund that it was. A stabilization fund for a town needs a 2/3 vote in order to pass. But a stabilization fund for a regional school district only needs a majority vote. So I have shared that information with the town of Townsend. I reached out to the town clerk, also the town manager, to make them aware of that. I know that our legal counsel double checked with DLR and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the attorneys from both of those organizations concurred that a majority vote was all that was needed to establish the stabilization fund. But at this point in time, I still have not heard anything official from Townsend. The majority vote, though, was I believe it was 42-27 was the final vote.
Jessica?
I think that has something to do with the town moderator, not necessarily town legal. I think it's with the moderator and his decision.
No, I know that a law was read, but again, I think it was the town, the town legal MGL that was read as opposed to the regional district. And again, the moderator, I'm not even sure if he's aware. I've only reached out to the town clerk and the town manager at this point.
And you've not heard anything back from the town administrator yet?
Not at this point, no.
Lisa, if you don't mind, just add one thing. So the Pepperell Select Board was going through their warrant articles for their upcoming town meeting, and so I answered some questions on the stabilization fund, and their select board unanimously recommended that be recommended at town meeting. So I think that was a good step in the right direction for Pepperell.
Also, did the town budget or the Townsend okay the school budget for 21-22?
Yes, both Ashby and Townsend have passed the budget for FY22.
Did Jess have your hand up again? Sorry. Go ahead.
Also, I just wanted to let you know that Jim Kreidler was on vacation last week, so he is back in the office as of today.
Perfect. Thank you. And I don't know, Superintendent, do we have any further clarification on whether or not this has to go to Ashby if it ends up passing in Pepperell? Or is it just the formality at that point? Or?
Well, it should still go to Ashby, but if it passes in Pepperell, it does in fact pass, but it should still go to Ashby so that they have the opportunity to vote on it.
Yep. And there's no issue waiting until their fall meeting at this point? Okay.
Pretty much as we explained in the at the Townsend town meeting, there is no money budgeted for the stabilization fund for FY22 anyway. So this would be an FY23 budget process, because we did share that anything that's put into the stabilization fund would be a part of the budget process, the budget summits. It would be a part of the budget narrative so that the communities know exactly what's going into the stabilization fund and why. The only thing we could potentially put into the stabilization fund initially would be the $250,000 that's budgeted for capital on an annual basis. But that's something we don't have to do that right away. We can wait until Ashby votes and make it part of the FY23 budget process.
All right. Lisa, anything else on finance?
You're good.
Thank you. Tom, negotiation and personnel.
So Thursday, we have our next round of negotiations with the teachers union, and that's kind of what we're working on at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you. And Randy is not here for policy, so is there any other open business? All right, someone want to?
Craig?
Yes.
Craig?
Yep.
Rob is not going to be able to serve on the negotiation subcommittee.
Yep.
So if the full committee could appoint me to replace him. If they so desire.
You're nominating yourself for the
I
negotiation?
am. Yeah.
Who's on that committee right now?
So Tom Casey, David Carney,
and
Jessica, and it would be Susan. So Susan would be coming back on as the fourth.
The fourth, okay.
I can nominate Susan if we need a nomination.
That would be great.
I'll nominate Susan Robbins to fill in for a committee member on the subcommittee for negotiations for the next year.
Second.
And Susan, your intent is to serve for the year or just until this round is done? Which?
We'll see what happens, at least until this round is done.
All right.
Well, there shouldn't be much to do after that.
Shouldn't be. We set the schedule so everything piles up on top of each other, right?
No, I'll stick on it for the year.
All right. Any other questions, comments on that? All right, so this is to appoint Susan to the Negotiation and Personnel Subcommittee for the 2021-22 year. So Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That was unanimous. Congrats, Susan. All right. If there's no more open business, I will ask somebody to read the large paragraph for executive session, since I'll have to read it again later.
Hang on, give me 1 sec. I got it.
Sure.
All right, I move that the school committee meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A for the following purposes. Purpose 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations to conduct collective bargaining sessions. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with a unit of the American West Regional School District Association, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. And purpose 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, so this vote will be to go to executive sessions. Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So the committee will now be meeting in executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purposes. Purpose 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the North Middlesex Regional School District teachers, nurses, secretarial, paraprofessional, and custodial units / associations, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. Purpose 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. That's for the approval of executive session minutes. The committee will not be reconvening in open session. So have a good night, everybody. And for the committee, we'll see you in the other meeting.